Boundaries. Do you have any? Ultimately, a boundary is saying no. It's saying no to the things that don't serve you. It's saying no to the things that hurt you. And it's standing up for yourself. It's speaking up for yourself when you're feeling walked on, when you're feeling taken for granted, when someone is being demeaning or patronizing or mean. Many times we don't think that we need boundaries. We think, oh, we have our family and I need to be there for them all the time. I need to do all the things for them. And yet that can leave you feeling very exhausted and feeling taken for granted and somewhat resentful of the other members in your household. The same thing happens at work. At work, when you don't have boundaries, it can show up a lot like feeling like your coworkers, your boss, your staff are walking all over you. It can feel like you're being taken for granted. It can feel like you're being given all the shit assignments. There's a number of ways in which not establishing boundaries can really harm you in the office environment. And honestly, if you want to lead, you've got to learn to set boundaries because people respect those who say no. They respect those who are very clear about what's important to them and what they're willing to tolerate. Without boundaries, you're tolerating all kinds of lousy behavior, I suspect, because that's usually what happens when people don't have their boundaries established. So I've had several clients come to me, and during the course of our time together, this particular topic has come up. And it may not have come up in terms of I need boundaries, because that's not usually how we think about it. It's come up more just like through conversation, through our sessions, that this family member is really treating me poorly and I don't know what to say. It leaves me upset. How do I manage this? How do I handle it? How my emotions are all over the place. Or it's I go to work and my boss is an ass and I feel horrible every day at work, or my coworkers are constantly just dumping stuff on me and they're hanging out at the water cooler and I'm working my butt off. And that's how it would kind of show up in session. So through working together, we realized that this was an instance of, in all of these instances, they hadn't established some boundaries. They weren't saying no, and they weren't sort of asserting themselves and speaking up for what they were willing to tolerate. And again, in a work environment, it seems a little bit more complicated, right? Because especially if it's your boss dumping on you, how do you set a boundary with your boss? Well, it's still possible. It's a matter of showing up in such a way that says, hey, boss, I appreciate that, but I've got quite a bit on my plate at the moment. I'm happy to do it. What's the deadline? And asking questions so you can get very clear on what the parameters are. And if they say the deadline is immediately, or it's urgent, or by the end of the day, then say, okay, well, of these other things that also appear to be equally urgent, could you help me clarify which can be pushed till tomorrow? And that's an example of setting a boundary, by just asking those questions to get really clear on what the requirement is for a task, right? In terms of personal involvement, it's communicating that you're not going to tolerate something. It's communicating with a coworker who is taking advantage, who you feel is taking advantage of you, saying things like, hey, Susie, I appreciate what you're saying here. However, I don't appreciate how you're treating me, or I don't appreciate the tone, or, that's really not what I'm here for. That's not what my role is. My understanding of your role is something this, that, or the other. So again, it's opening up the lines of communication. So in order to establish boundaries, it requires a development of really good, strong communication skills, or what I like to call dynamic communication. And that's one of the skills that I help my clients learn in my leadership development training and coaching programs, is this ability to communicate in a dynamic manner that allows you to be respected and trusted and looked up to, rather than looked down upon or walked upon. So it creates the opposite of what may currently be going on if you don't have boundaries established. So if you are a person who feels taken for granted, if you feel like your coworkers, staff, boss, everybody are walking all over you, this doesn't matter where you are in an organization. It doesn't matter what what your relationship status is. If you're feeling taken for granted, walked on, picked on, people are being mean to you kind of thing, where it's unwarranted, it just seems cruel, then let's have a chat about how you could establish the boundaries and what's really going on and what you could potentially do to resolve the situation through leadership training and coaching. So that's what I've got today. If that sounds like you or someone you know, if it's someone you know, please feel free to share this. If it's you need some boundaries established and you need some help to do that, then drop a comment below, send me a DM, shoot up a flare, and we'll schedule a conversation and we'll have a chat about what it's like, or how I might be able to help you establish those boundaries. That's all I got. Like I said, have a wonderful day and take care. We'll talk next week. Bye-bye.